Hi. It is time for SH MonsterArts to fall, and for the movie Monster series, with its limited articulation and inferior paint jobs, to reign supreme.
Not if I have anything to say about it.
Hi. Who wants them next?
You.
Hit me. Go on. Hit me as hard as you can.
Again. Again. Harder.
Freak. Dude, what is up with you?
I need something to punch.
Anyone who's big into Godzilla knows what SH MonsterArts is. It's one of the most recognizable action figure lines in the entire franchise and one that most people are familiar with. And if you know me, well, I do have my issues. I know my audience, and from what I've gathered, you guys really like hearing me complain about things. Sometimes I worry that I spread way too much negativity for my own good. But hey, whatever gets me more than 20 cents a day off of this platform, I guess. So if you clicked on this video, then worry not, cause you'll get your rants, but I'll also be singing my praises when they're appropriate. To start, let me talk about my stance on SH MonsterArts. I made quite a few videos in the past about their MonsterVerse releases, and I still feel like the points I brought up are valid. Primarily the poor engineering, lackluster paint jobs, and overall inaccurate and ugly sculpts. Now before anyone comments, I know that it's supposed to be stylized, but still not my cup of tea. For the price range that they charge for these figures, these problems are inexcusable to me. While these are issues that I had with their MonsterVerse releases, the same problems can also extend to their Toho figures. In case you haven't seen it, I reviewed the SH MonsterArts Godzilla 2004 in a previous video, and even though it was a reissue, a good handful of the issues present from the initial release were still present. I recommend watching that video too, but to sum it up, quality control really screwed up the sculpt, the paint chipped away way too easily, the paint was straight up incomplete, and the figure just loved falling apart. I also have the SH MonsterArts Jet Jaguar 1973, which I haven't done a review on yet. Let me know if you'd like to see one. I think this figure is an excellent example of an ugly sculpt and poor engineering from MonsterArts. The entire figure feels so awkwardly put together, especially the hips. The face also seems really unsettling to me. Sometimes I worry he watches me while I sleep. Ugh. With how much crap I talk about SH MonsterArts, I surely hate them as a whole, is what most people would think. Despite everything, I don't actually hate MonsterArts. I mean, anything is better than Titan 13. I tend to exaggerate my opinions in my video titles for the sake of engagement and entertainment. Just a common YouTuber trick. There are times where I'm genuinely impressed by what they put out, even if I'm just an outsider looking in for most releases. For instance, their Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla figure of Godzilla looks phenomenal. Heck, I might even prefer it over the Hayatoys version.
You what?
I'd even consider having it for myself eventually. Unfortunately, we're not here to talk about that today, but I do have the next best thing. This is the SH MonsterArts Godzilla 1972 from Godzilla vs. Gigan. If I were to pick one Godzilla design to represent the Showa era films, I'd pick Godzilla 1954. I mean, what are you expecting? He's like probably one of the most iconic ones from the era. But 1972 would definitely be a very close second. This design actually starred in 4 different films spanning from 1968 to 1972. You'll see why this is specifically labeled as the 1972 version later. I actually got this figure almost 2 years ago as a birthday present for myself.
I am so lonely.
Out of all the MonsterArts figures that were out at the time, this is the one I wanted to get the most, and for good reasons, as I'm about to elaborate on. Tamashii Nations almost nailed the sculpt on this figure. It's almost like Godzilla was pulled straight out of the movies. The only thing I can really complain about is the head. The mouth doesn't close all the way, which is a feature that the actual suit had. With that, Godzilla will always have his chomper showing, meaning you can smell his musty breath from miles away. My new headcanon is that Godzilla's heat ray is actually the stench coming out of his mouth. And to think this is the design that fought Hedorah, isn't that kind of hypocritical? A monster made of pollution versus a monster who practically pollutes the air with his poor hygiene. I probably just encouraged 3 kids not to brush their teeth in hopes of becoming like Godzilla. To clarify, that is a bad thing. The head really is the only thing that feels off though. I know there are some people who sell alternative parts for figures like this, but I don't know if I'll ever get any. Maybe in the distant future. Overall, the sculpt is very solid, surprisingly enough. But what about the paint? The paint job on this figure is really good for the most part. Godzilla will sport his signature charcoal gray on most of his body, but there will be hints of green throughout, especially on his chest. Unfortunately, this does lead to some segments of the body not entirely matching in color with the other parts. It's one of those things you won't notice until you really get a closer look, so I won't be too harsh about it. The teeth and inside of the mouth are very well painted and as neat as you can get for a figure under mass production. With that in mind, it's almost inevitable that it won't be perfect. Some of the red from the inside of the mouth will extend to the teeth, being especially noticeable on the lower jaw. I really like the yellows and browns used on the claws. They're neatly painted for the most part, but again, not perfect. The outer sections of the dorsal plates will be painted silver, and I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate since it's pretty hard to tell. It still looks cool nonetheless. The paint application on the plates is alright overall, but once you go along the tail, you can see that they slowly began to give up. Oddly enough, that's almost exactly how it looks on the promotional pictures too, meaning it's not even a matter of prototype versus final. Well, it's suit accurate, and the promotional pictures didn't lie, so I guess I can't really dock too many points for it. With that, the paint job is fairly decent on this figure. It's no masterpiece, but it's serviceable given the circumstances. So far, I've talked about the mostly accurate sculpt, as well as the decent paint job. Now let me tell you where this figure truly shines. The articulation. But KJS, I hear you say. This is an SH MonsterArts figure. They're known for articulation. What makes this one so special? There are quite a few points to talk about actually. This figure will come with all the articulation you would expect from a MonsterArts figure. The difference here? It doesn't fall apart from the slightest touches. Take a look. My other SH MonsterArts figures usually fall apart somewhere, even if I don't apply too much force. The problem usually occurs in the tails of the figures. This figure doesn't have that problem. In fact, you really don't have to worry about anything popping off unless you really force the articulation. Seriously, look at all the fun stuff I can do with Godzilla without him falling apart. This could be because the figure itself is considerably big, but it definitely works in its favor. A small detail I'd like to point out about the tail is that there's a slot in one of the segments that makes room for one of the dorsal plates. This is an excellent workaround that allows for less restricted articulation than the tail. A similar slot is also present for one of the plates on Godzilla's neck. Speaking of dorsal plates, did I mention that one of them actually has movement? Just underneath Godzilla's neck, the plate underneath is attached to what I believe is a ball joint, meaning that Godzilla will be able to stand more upright than he would if the plate were static. The plate pushes against the larger one, moving up as needed for the figure to reach the desired pose. It's little additions like this that tell me how much thought and care was put into the engineering of this figure. As a result, this figure will receive full points for its articulation, but we're not quite done yet. There's one last thing I have to show you. This figure comes with an alternative head, specifically his look from Godzilla vs. Gigan, where he's bleeding from the top of his head. This is why the figure was specifically labeled as 1972. Even if this figure lacks other accessories, I think this is a really nice thing to include. With that out of the way, let me share my final thoughts on this figure. Godzilla 1972 is a figure that really stands out compared to the other MonsterArts figures of my collection. Where it lacks in sculpt and detail, it seriously makes up for with its articulation. It's the kind of articulation that I was hoping that my 2004 figure could pull off. It's a very well put together figure despite its flaws, and is proof that SH MonsterArts really is capable of effectively pulling off what they're best known for. That said, I'll give this figure a solid 8.5 out of 10. I'd recommend this figure to just about any Godzilla fan. Well, that's the end of the video. I know people don't really stick for the end cards. But if you enjoyed that opening skit, please watch the Kaiju Market. The latest episode, Godzilla Gambles, is probably my best work yet. Or if you want more figure reviews like this, then check out this playlist. Alright, I'll catch you all later. Stomp on.